Book 6. Didn't. It didn't even sound comfortable. ALASDAIR Reginald Cynster, widely known with a good reason as Lucifer, pushed the word from his mind with a disgusted snort and concentrated on turning his pair of high-breed blacks down a narrow lane. The lane led south toward the coast. Colton, his destination, lay along it. Around him early summer clasped the countryside in a benevolent embrace. Breezes rippled the corn, swallows rode the currents high above, black darts against the blue sky. Thick hedges bordered the lane. From the box of his curricle, Lucifer could only just see over them. Not that there was anything to see in this quiet rural backwater. It wasn't a curse to be trifled with. It had already claimed 5 of his nearest male relatives, with all the other members of the notorious group had, for so many years, lorded it over the ton. The bar Cynster had cut swaths through the ranks of London ladies, leaving them languishing, exhausted in their wake. They'd been daring, devilish, invincible, until one by one the curse had caught them. Now he was the last one, unshackled, unwed, unrepentant. He had nothing against marriage per se, but the unfortunate fact was that the crux of the curse was that the Cynsters did not simply marry. They married ladies they loved. He was determined to avoid the curse. He could manage very well without love. So he slipped away from Gabriel and Althea's wedding breakfast and left London. When Gabriel married, he succeeded to the title of principal matrimonial target of the ladies of the ton. Consequently, he dismissed all invitations to the summer country house parties. He'd driven to Quiverstone Manor, his parents' estate in Somerset, leaving his groom Doswell, a local there, to visit with his sister. He left Quiverstone early this morning and headed through the countryside. Abstinence it would be. The village, neat and tidy in the bright sunshine, looked like a artist's vision of the rustic ideal. Steeped in peace and harmony, ahead to the right, the common sloped upward. A church stood on the crest, a solid Norman structure flanked by a well-guarded graveyard. Beyond the graveyard, another lane ran down, presumably joining the main lane further on. The main lane in itself curved to the left, bordered by a line of cottages facing the common. The sign of an inn jutted over the lane just before it swung out of sight. Nearer to hand was the duck pond on the common. The blacks stamped and shook their heads at the quacking. He quieting them, Lucifer looked to the left at the first house of the village back in its gardens, a name carved on the portico. It was squinted Colton Manor, his destination. The manor was a handsome house of pale sandstone, 2 stories and antiques in the Georgian style, with rows of long pediment windows flanking the portico and front door. Colton Manor looked what it was, a prosperous gentleman's residence. It was the home of Horatio Wilhelm, the reason Lucifer had chosen Colton as his temporary boathold. Horatio's letter had reached him 3 days ago. An old friend and his mentor in all matters pertaining to collecting, Horatio had invited him to visit at Colton's at his earliest convenience, with the grand dames turning their sights on him. Convenient had been immediately. He grasped the excuse to disappear from the social world. At one time he had haunted Horatio's house in the Lake District, but although he and Horatio had remained as close as ever, over the 3 years since Horatio had moved to Devon, they'd only met at collectors' gatherings around the country and in London. This was his first visit to Colton. He learned soon enough. Clicking the reins, he set the blacks in motion. Turning snarlily in between the tall gate-posts, he drew the curricle side by side of the house with the usual crunching and stamping of hoofs. No one came running. He listened and heard nothing but the sounds of birds and insects. Then he remembered it was Sunday. Horatio and all his household would be at church. Glancing up at the common, he verified the church door stood ajar. He looked at the Manor's front door. It stood open partially. Someone appeared was home. This was Martha's garden. Martha was Horatio's late wife. She'd been the anchor around the Lake District household had revolved. Martha had loved gardening, striving through all weathers to create glorious displays like this. Outside of his mother, aunts, Lucifer had felt closer to Martha than any other woman. She occupied a special place in his life. He often listened to her lectures, whereas to his mother he'd been deaf. Martha had not been related. It had always just been easier to hear the truth from her. Seeing Martha's gardens here felt odd, like a hand on a sleeve when there was no one there. He frowned. He could almost hear Martha whispering in her soft, gentle voice. Abruptly, he turned the portico. The front door was half open. He pushed it wide. The hall was empty. "Hello? Is anyone about?" No response. All he could hear was the summer buzzing outside. He smelled blood before he reached the door. Waterloo, it was one scent he'd never mistake. The hairs at his nape lifted. He slowed. At his back, the sun glowed bright and warm. The cold quiet of the house intensified. It drew him on. His skin turned cold. After an instant hiatus, he forced his gaze to travel the old lined face, the straggly white hair covered by a tasseled cap. Horatio! On his knees, he searched for a pulse at his wrist or throat and found none. Hand on Horatio's chest, he felt a lingering warmth, slight color, and grace the old man's cheeks. Mind reeling, Lucifer stepped back on his heels. Horatio had been murdered minutes ago. The single killing stroke had been an upward thrust to the heart, like a bayonet. Not much blood, just a little odd. Frowning, he checked there was more blood beneath the body. Horatio had been turned onto his back later. He'd originally fallen face down. Cursing beneath his breath, he felt like he'd kicked in the gut. After the serenity outside, finding Horatio like this seemed obscene. He lay slumped on the floor. He must have gone down with a sack of bricks, but he couldn't remember the impact. He had no idea whether he'd lost consciousness, only regained it, or whether he'd only reached the floor. Exerting every last ounce of will, he cracked his eyes open. Horatio's face swam in and out of focus. Someone hit him over the head. The leaden knife was still in his fist, but his right arm was trapped beneath his body. He couldn't move. The body felt like a lead weight. From the door behind, Philadelphia Talent stared wide-eyed at the gentleman now stretched lifeless beside Horatio Wilhelm's body. A squeak of dismay escaped her. The ridiculous sound prodded her into action. Dragging in a breath, she stepped forward and bent both hands around the pole of the hale beard now lying around the floor. She hadn't meant to fall. Having only just walked in and discovered Horatio's body, she hadn't been thinking all that clearly. When the stranger's footsteps had sounded on the gravel outside, she panicked. He called hello, but so might a murderer checking to see if anyone else had come upon the scene. So she hit him over the head. Steeling herself, she stepped over the pole. Oh, God, please don't let me have killed him. Horatio had been murdered, and now she murdered a stranger. What was her world coming to? Lucifer sensed the present approaching. He couldn't hear, he couldn't see, but he knew they knelt at his back. The murderer, he had to assume, if he could only gather enough strength to lift his lids. He tried, but nothing happened. Unconsciousness swelled, lapping him. He refused to go under and sink. Fingers, small fingers, touched his cheek gently, hesitantly. The touch blazed his brain. Not the murderer. Relief swept through him and relentlessly carried him into the black. Please, please don't die. Her eyes grew wide. The murderer? Her witty, panicky wits calmed enough for her to distinguish the voice as the conveyance rolled around the house. Not the murderer. The manor staff had returned. But here she was in Horatio's drawing room, in breeches instead of being laid down on her bed at the Grange with a sick headache. And she couldn't explain, not without revealing her reason for being here. Those misplaced personal belongings were worse, they weren't hers. She didn't actually know why they were so important, why the revelation was to be avoided at all costs. Think! What if, instead of waiting here and landing herself in a morass of impossible explanations, she left, cut through the wood, changed, and returned? She could easily think of an errand. She could be back in 10 minutes. And then she hears the gentleman hats often had their owners' names embroidered on the inside. Sweeping around Horatio's body, Philippa reached for the brown hat. I'll go check on the master. Keep an eye on the pot, will you? Jugs, open the door. The words uttered in Lucifer's are usually associated with his mother jerked back to consciousness. No, no, can't do that. A heavy male voice. Might be wise. Wise. Has he regained consciousness at all since you picked him up at the manor? So he was no longer at the manor. Where the hell was he? Nah, out like a light he is. How do you know he's still alive? The woman said. Alive? Of course he's alive. He wouldn't be. Just swooned, that's all. Swooned. He's a swell. You know how long they say swooned? Right Ivorish they are. They found him slumped by Mr. Wellham's body. If he hadn't swooned but sustained some injury, he could have had sus got any injury. Maybe he fought the murderer trying to save Mr. Wellham. Nah, that way he'd have Nibs here and someone else the murderer. They'd make two people coming in separate from outside in one day, with no one seeing either of them. Just plain doesn't happen. Jugs, open this door. What if the gentleman dies all because you decided he swooned when that wasn't so at all? We have to check. He swooned, I tell you. Not a mark on him that Simpson could see. There, see? It's his head that hurts. The back of his head. Why, if he'd simply swooned, Jugs, open the door. There's something very wrong here. Lucifer let his hand fall. If he could have, he would have roared at Jugs to open the damn door. Of course there was something wrong. The murderer had costume. What on earth did they think happened? Maybe he hit his head when he fell. Why the hell did they imagine he'd fallen? But the jingle of keys pushed the thought from Lucifer's mind. The lady had won. She was coming to his aid. A lock clanged, then a heavy door scraped. A quick footsteps brisked cautiously across the stone. Everything will be all right. Let me check your head. The pain in his head evaporated. Opening his eyes further, Lucifer drank in the details of her face. She was not a girl, but she would still qualify as a young lady, somewhere in her early 20s. Yet her face held more character, more strength, and blatant determination than was common in her years. He noted, but it was not that held his captive awareness, to the exclusion of the debilitating pain in his head. Her brown eyes were large, wide, and filled with concern, with an open empathy that reached past his cynical shields and touched him. The sudden surge of sensual thoughts and impulses didn't sit well. Horatio was dead. He let his lids fall. You'll feel better directly, once we move you onto a comfortable bed. Ah, he's that sort of gentleman, I wager, Jug said. Perhaps he hit his head on the table in the manor drawing-room when he swooned. Jugs, you know as well as I do his wound is severe for that. Let me see. A heavy hand lifted Lucifer's head, and it exploded in pain. He's been hit violently on the back of the head. Jugs has seen the wound too. A new voice, deep, cultured, but tinged with the local country accent. Lucifer wondered just who Papa was. Ah, he looks like he's been coshed good and proper, Jug said. Yes. Lucifer felt the lady fingers part his hair. Don't touch Papa. It seems very sensitive. He gained consciousness for a moment, but fainted when Jugs touched his head. Not with the wound and the halberd lying beside him. Looks like the murderer hid behind the door and coshed him when he discovered the body. Mrs. Hemming swears the thing couldn't have fallen on its own. Seems clear enough, so we'll have to wait and see what this gentleman can tell us when he regains consciousness. Papa snorted. Self-defense. Had a moment warning the murderer was behind him and grabbed the only weapon to hand. Not much use against a halberd. Unfortunately, no. It was obvious that someone had found the body and turned it over. Can't see the murderer bothering. It wasn't as if Horatio had been carrying any valuables in his nightshirt. Felicita looked in on her patient as soon as Gladys, their housekeeper, reported that he was settled. He's resting quietly. Phillida nodded and went to the bed. They left him sprawled on his stomach to spare his sore head. He was much larger than she realized. The expanse of his shoulders and chest, the long lines of his back, the even longer strength of his legs His body dominated the bed. He wasn't perhaps the largest man she'd seen, but she suspected he should have been the most vital. Sweetie was wrong. He was unconscious, not truly resting. Philadelphia straightened, guilt swept her. It had been her fault he'd been hit. She glided back to Sweetie. I'm going to the manor. I'll be back in an hour. I really couldn't say, sir. Philadelphia entered the manor's front hall to Bristolford, Horatio's butler interrogated by Lucius Appleby directly before the closed room door. They both turned. Miss Talent, good afternoon. Local ladies considered Appleby's fair good looks attractive. Sir Cedric asked me to inquire as to the details of Mr. Wellham's death. He was secretary to Sir Cedric Fordham, a local landowner. No one would be surprised at Cedric's interest. Bristolford was telling me that Jasper has declared himself satisfied that the gentleman discovered by the body is not the murderer. That's correct. The murderer is as of yet unknown. Unwilling to encourage further discussion, Phillida returned to Bristolford. I asked John Ostler to attend the gentleman's horses. His magnificent horses, even to her untutored eye, the pair were expensive beauties. Her twin brother Jonas would be over to see to them just as soon as he learned of their existence. They'd arrived that afternoon just as she'd been rushing off to rescue unknown gentlemen. Because of her useless cousin, she'd been too late to save him from Jug's clutches. I don't know, Miss. Hemmings and I haven't been with the master long enough to know all his friends. Quite, no doubt Covey will know. Covey was Horatio's valet and had been with him for years. I take it he's not back yet? No, miss. He'll be devastated. I'll just look in to pick up the gentleman's hat. Hat? There was no hat, miss. Are you sure? Nothing in the drawing room or out here, perhaps in his carriage. No, I assumed he must have had a hat. No cane either? Well, then I'll be off. When he woke, she was gone. It was dark, the house was quiet. Stumbling, Lucifer lifted his head, the pain stopped. Gritting his teeth, he shifted on his side. Raising his head just a fraction, he looked around the room. An older woman in a mob cap sat slumped in an armchair by the window. Focusing his hearing, he could hear gentle snores. His thoughts, he pushed them in different direction. His guardian angel wasn't here. Doubtless she was asleep in her bed. The memories lived, but Horatio was gone. A formative chapter in his life had ended. It was difficult to accept that he'd reached the last page and now had to close the book. Grief ebbed and left him empty. He'd been seen death too many times for the shock to hold him for long. He came from a warrior caste. Unjust was the trigger for one of the most primal responses, revenge. Not for personal satisfaction, but in the name of justice. Horatio's death would not go unavenged. He lay in the soft sheets while grief transmuted to anger, eventually coalescing into icy resolution. So Horatio had been murdered. Then he'd been entered and the murderer had caught him with the halberd. Then the woman had entered and found him. No, that couldn't be right. Horatio's body had been turned on its back before he arrived. He agreed with Papa it hadn't been the murderer who'd done that. The woman must have. Then she'd hidden when he appeared. She halted. He heard a creak in the hallway. She halted 6 feet away, studying his face. One hand held the candlestick. The other rested between her breasts. An anchoring shawl. It was the first time he'd seen all of her. He didn't try to stop himself from looking, noting, assessing her face as he recalled wide eyes, taper chin, and sleek dark hair, giving an impression of intelligence and feminine resolve. Lucifer bit back an urge to call her. He wanted to thank her. She'd been a Madonna of kindness and caring. But if he made a sound, he'd scare her out of his wits. He watched her stop by the sleeping woman. Setting her candlestick down, she lifted a blanket, shook it out, and tucked it around the woman. She started for the door, but as if she heard his silent plea, she halted before she passed the bed. She looked at his way, then hesitantly drew nearer and nearer. Holding the candle aside to his face, was screened by her body. She rested against the bed a foot away and studied his face anew. He fought to keep his eyelids steady. He could only just see her face. Her eyes were fathomless, her expression unreadable. It was you. Oh, she's sleepy. She's a little sleepy baby. So, Who murdered Horatio? And what will happen between PHYLLIDA and Lucifer? Do you think there'll be a romance here? Yeah, think? She looks at him. They have to investigate the murder. They have to get to know each other. Are you interested in learning more? We started with, I dropped all these before, so excuse me. But we started with A Devil's Bride, A Rake's Vow, Scandal's Bride, and then we did a prequel. You can read this first if you like, but there are spoilers here. So you want to go through this one before you do this one, or you can do this one first. It's up to you. You can read it any way you want. That's how we did it. And then we did Damon's and Felicity's, and we did Gabriel's and ALASDAIR's, and Gabriel and ALATHEA. Excuse me, ALATHEA. And today we are reading All About Love with Lucifer and PHYLLIDA and their romance, and wait till the relatives get a hold of the fact that he's found the love of his life. And the first thing she did to him was cock him over the head with a heavy object, and knocked him out because she thought he had killed Horatio, but then upon investigation realized that he had not killed his absolute best friend in the world. So to find out what happened, you'll just have to read the rest of the book. And we get to take a break from family, a short break, by the way. And we're going to deal with a family friend, Chillingsworth. I do not know why I did this 20 years ago, but I wrote it on the cover. I should have really put it on the spine, but I didn't, or not write it at all. But this is Chillingsworth's book. He's someone that likes to spar with Devil, and Devil was from the first book. These characters show up from book to book to book. They're supporting characters. They will appear in all these books. The characters from all these books, well, if they're not the main characters of the book, they're supporting characters in the book. And we will see that again in the Bastion Club. The Bastion Club takes a little time before this. It starts a little bit before, but then it runs during. And that's how she wrote them. She wrote the Bastion Club after she wrote the first 9 Cynsters. After we do Chillingsworth, we'll do the twins, Amanda and Amelia. And then we will do the Bastion Club. And then we will do the Black Cobra Club. And then we will do the Buccaneers. And the Buccaneers are huge. I think they're the best books she's ever written, with the Buccaneers. All 4 books had to happen at the same time. All 4 books. If character A and B are having a conversation with character C and D, it has to happen. If it's happening at 5 o'clock in this book, it has to happen at 5 o'clock in this book. And it's amazing how she did it. And it was the best stuff she's ever written in her life. The books afterwards, I've had nightmares how horrible the book after that was. We had waited literally 20 years for this book to be written. I was totally convinced that I would never live long enough to see this book written. And I'm thinking, I don't know if it was fan pressure or publisher pressure or what happened, that she decided to go ahead and finally write this book. And it's not, they put it in a large paperback form so they could charge more for it. It has less pages than all of these, and they charged more for it, and it was the worst book she'd ever written. Other fans agree with me. Absolutely the worst book she'd ever written. But we didn't get there yet. Let's get through the Cynsters first. Let's get through the Bastion Club. Let's get through the Black Cobras. Let's get through the Buccaneers. And then we'll do the rest of the Cynsters. The characters show up from book to book to book to book to book. They recurring. We get to hear progression. We get to hear who's gotten who's had kids, who's grown up, who's done this, who's done that. You follow the family through the whole situation. I hope you have a good day. It was really warm today. And don't forget to like and subscribe the video if you're still here at this point. I'd really appreciate it. I forgot to say anything at the beginning. Have a good day.